request to exercise the right of reply. May I remind members that statements in the exercise of the right of reply are limited to 10 minutes for the first intervention and to 5 minutes for the second intervention, and should be made by delegation from their seats. With that, I call on the representative of Armenia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to have to ask for the floor at this late hour, but unfortunately I have to address some of the remarks made by the statement by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan. We have witnessed really two magnificent days here at this chamber, yesterday, today, and we're looking forward to tomorrow, where the humanity, the 193 countries of the world, of the members of the United Nations, have come together for a historic cause to adopt the Millennium Development Goals and to go ahead to make one more step ahead to 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. These are historic days, this is a historic move, and I'm surprised how and why a delegation is willing to spoil the whole fun, the whole glory of these days. Goal number 16 of the Sustainable Development Goals says, is dedicated to the promotion of peaceful societies for sustainable development. Truly, Azerbaijan has made economic growth, but the whole income from that economic growth, unfortunately, has not gone to sustain development for peace and prosperity in the region, but the whole growth has gone into the arms, into the arm deals. The country that is boasting with its military expenditures, which has grown 20-fold during the last few years, is simply surprising. Instead of putting the money in the fulfillment of the development goals in the MDGs or SDGs, the country is militarizing itself beyond any possible reason, any possible logic. The data that was presented in the statement by the Minister of the Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan quotes about a so-called 1 million refugees in the country. I'm really surprised, and I would suggest that the Minister looks up some of his data in the official database. UNHCR, which I would open the brackets, I would open the abbreviation for the Azerbaijan delegation, is the United Nations High Commissioner's Office for Refugees, states on its official website that the number of refugees residing in Azerbaijan is 1,299 people. The number of refugees who have originated from Azerbaijan is 10,521. Most of them have come to Armenia from Azerbaijan. There are 394 people seeking asylum in Azerbaijan, and 4,402 people are seeking asylum in different countries from Azerbaijan. And this is the only official data which is on the UNHCR rostrum, UNHCR database, nothing about 1 million. So definitely it's not surprising to hear more and more lies from this delegation, which are accusing, abusing the right of their statements and trying to provoke, trying to instigate anyone, and nothing about their own problems, nothing about their responsibilities. Yes, refugees have the right to return to their homes, but who said that only the Azerbaijani refugees have the right to return to their homes? What about the Armenian refugees who had to flee their homes, their villages, their towns as a result of massacres, pogroms, persecution by the Azerbaijani government? Don't they have the same right? I do believe that there can be no differentiation based on race, based on ethnicity. A refugee has the right to return to their homes to their place of residence. And if Azerbaijan minister is sincere in his willingness for refugees to return to their homes, he would sincerely negotiate with the Armenian delegation, with his Armenian counterpart, in order to be able to find peaceful solution to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, which will enable also the return of each and every refugee to their homes and houses. If this is, and I repeat, and if this is only his sincere wish. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I call on the representative of Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is unfortunate that the representative of Armenia has once again used the opportunity of our debate to make groundless propagandistic statements. In reality, we have witnessed yet another unsuccessful attempt of that member state to mislead the international community by means of falsification. I would like to briefly comment on what the representative of Armenia preferred to pass over in silence and what he deliberately distorted. First, the fact that military force was used against Azerbaijan, that the armed forces of Armenia seized and continue to occupy the territories of Azerbaijan, including the Nagorno-Karabakh region and the 7 surrounding districts, has been well evidenced and requires no additional comments. Second, through the relevant resolutions of the United Nations Security Council and General Assembly and documents adopted by other international organizations, the international community has consistently deplored and condemned in the strongest terms the use of military force against Azerbaijan and the resulting occupation of its territories. Reaffirming the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Azerbaijan and the inviolability of its internationally recognized borders, and demanding immediate, complete and unconditional withdrawal of the Armenian forces from all the occupied territories of Azerbaijan. It would be useful if the delegation of Armenia could read those documents carefully. Third, in the course of its aggression, Armenia has carried out ethnic cleansing of the seized areas by expelling about 1 million Azerbaijanis from their homes and has committed other serious crimes during the conflict. Thus, in its relevant resolutions, the United Nations Security Council specifically condemned the attacks on civilians and bombardments of inhabited areas within Azerbaijan. The European Court of Human Rights, in its 2010 judgment, arrived at an important conclusion, qualifying the offenses of the invading Armenian troops against Azerbaijani civilians as acts of particular gravity that amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Fourth, Armenia established the ethnically constructed subordinate separatist entity on the occupied territories of Azerbaijan, which is under its total political, military, and financial dependence and control. And this has been clearly confirmed by the European Court of Human Rights in its judgment of 16th June 2015. The government of Armenia, which has purged both the territory of its own country and the occupied territories of Azerbaijan of all non-Armenians and thus succeeded in creating mono-ethnic cultures there, should be the last one speaking on such notions as peace, human rights, and self-determination. Armenia continues to pursue unconstructive position on the negotiations and takes actions that are aimed at destabilizing of the situation on the ground, derailing the peace process, and ultimately consolidating the status quo of occupation. The Armenian side regularly and deliberately violates the ceasefire by attacking and killing Azerbaijani military personnel as well as civilians residing in the territories adjacent to the front line. In recent times, such violations and armed provocations have become more frequent and violent. Finally, in reality, by disregarding the demands of the international community, by continuing to occupy the territories of Azerbaijan, by deliberately denying the right of about 1 million Azerbaijani refugees and IDPs to return to their homes, by pursuing racist ideology, and by misinterpreting the fundamental norms and principles of international law, Armenia clearly demonstrates who is actually responsible for undermining the regional peace, security, and stability. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I call on the representative of Armenia for his second intervention. This time, 5 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always have admired the huge possibilities that the language has given to the humanity. And the language has enabled human beings to express the thoughts, expressions, ideas. The language has been used also in fairy tales, in legends, and one does not need to listen to the accusations, allegations that were just made. One simply needs to read the newspapers that go back 20 years ago. Who, what, when, how the whole thing was started, who was the first to attack, who was the invader. I do believe it was Azerbaijan who attacked the peaceful people of Nagorno-Karabakh, who simply wanted to be independent from Azerbaijan, from the Soviet Azerbaijan. And in fact, Nagorno-Karabakh has never been part of Azerbaijan throughout its history, because at least the history of Nagorno-Karabakh is definitely thousands of years older than that of Azerbaijan. And there is no way that Azerbaijan has any right whatsoever upon Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh people expressed their right to be independent, and because of their willingness to be independent, they were attacked, they were slaughtered, they were massacred, and they decided to be separate from a country which was willing to kill them. And no need to cite the Security Council resolutions, definitely, because the Security Council resolutions call upon Azerbaijan as well to stop the fighting, to stop killing people, which is still continuing. And right yesterday, Azerbaijani military was shelling Armenian border, was shelling the Nagorno-Karabakh border. Isn't this happening with a country which is speaking about some sort of justice? I do believe that the Azerbaijan delegation, before speaking, before mixing the history with reality, before bringing out legends instead of reality, should definitely have a look at its own history, should definitely have a look at its recent history, and exactly remember who started the whole mess. If you want peace, you need to live peaceful. If you're bringing war to your neighbor, you'll meet the war and you'll lose more regions. That was how the whole thing happened. Nagorno-Karabakh wanted to be independent. In order to secure its borders, in order to secure its peaceful population from the shelling of the Azerbaijani army, they needed to have a security border perimeter around the Nagorno-Karabakh proper. That is how the whole thing was. And it will continue unless Azerbaijan sits really at the negotiating table and is truly and strongly willing to find a solution. Otherwise, these sort of right of replies will continue endlessly. And I don't think that this is the proper place, this is the proper day, and this is the proper occasion. Thank you.
I call on the representative of Azerbaijan for his second intervention. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The remarks just made by the delegation of Armenia, full of usual distortions and misinterpretations, demonstrate how that member state is far from even thinking to engage in a constructive search for peace. In fact, the delegation of Armenia has introduced nothing new and once again abused its right to speak from the high rostrum of the United Nations. As a result, we have heard irrelevant and out of context comments that obviously fail to respond to our arguments. We regret that Armenia, instead of contributing to the ongoing conflict settlement process, gives preference to provocations and escalation with unpredictable consequences. Such a stance of Armenia represents an open challenge to the conflict settlement process and a serious threat to international and regional peace and security. The earlier the leadership of Armenia realized the lack of any prospect of its destructive political agenda, the sooner our peoples will be able to benefit from peace, stability, and cooperation. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time now is our enemy, and we should have a good sleep, and we shall continue the high-level plenary meeting tomorrow morning, this whole 9 a.m. sharp. The meeting is adjourned.